All right. Welcome to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week, we're happy to have filmmaker Ned Benson. His new film, The Greatest Hits, is getting a brief theatrical release before debuting on Hulu. Uh, Ned, thank you for joining the show today, and hope you're doing well.
Thanks, Brett. Same goes for you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, The Greatest Hits have been kind of rummaging around in your head for nearly 2 decades. I believe I read. Um, can you talk a little bit about the pathway from the idea to actually filming it and releasing it?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this concept of like how a song is a time travel mechanism for a while, and then I read this book by Oliver Sacks called Musicophilia, which is about how music interacts with the brain and things like musical hallucinations and synesthesia. And I'm profoundly affected by music. Like music has always thrown me back to moments in my life with such specificity. So those two things compounded really like were the genesis of the idea. And then I wrote a script in like 2008, 2009 that wasn't quite working. But it was around, and then kind of like it was shelved while I focused on other stuff. And in that process, I made a bunch of other things, directed commercials, blah, blah, blah. And then during COVID, after I had a movie fall apart beforehand, my manager was like, why don't you take this one off the shelf and have a look at it? And through the lens of like isolation and COVID, I think I started to see what the movie really was. And I think I'd obviously grown as a person to a degree just through my own personal relationships. So uh, I wrote a draft that I think worked better, and then shared it with Searchlight, and they agreed to make the movie. So
Yeah. How much time did it take to gather, like, the financing, and or were obvious Searchlight paid for it, but I mean do the whole pre-production thing before you were actually shooting?
yeah, I mean they picked it up. It was like November of 21, and we were shooting in August of 22. So we were in pre-production by May of 22, and then yeah, we finished shooting end of sort of like November of 22. So
Okay.
like kind of from start to finish, like a year,
It's not too bad.
just pretty quick.
Yeah. Tell me about, the cast. You've got, a bunch of rising stars. In fact, I mean, David Cornswood is James Gunn's Superman
Mhm.
now, since you've made your film. All of them are, you know, have been in some notable things and are serious up and comers. What's your connection to, I guess, the younger cast in terms of presenting what the ideas were in your head and getting them out of them?
Yeah, I Lucy was someone who was on our radar for sure for this character, and when she read the script, she really responded, and we had a meeting, and yeah, just got along. She's such a great human being, and we went into this rehearsal process, and once I knew who Harriet was, I was able to figure out, okay, like let's meet some people for these other characters and see who makes sense in terms of chemistry. And she'd had a prior relationship with David Cornsweet because they worked together. They actually played boyfriend and girlfriend in The Politician,
Mhm.
uh, a series that they were on together. So that kind of was a nice thing to have. There was this like pre-existing relationship that we could take into the Max Harriet dynamic. And then I met Justin Min through one of my producers who's also has a casting background, and she just loved Justin, and meeting him, I just saw that he's a really special human being, really lovely, and obviously very talented. And Same with Austin, similar process, like through the same person, Cassandra Koulougandis. She introduced me to Austin, and so there we had this sort of like, the four leads, and we went into a rehearsal process together and really dug out, subtext and backstories for each of these characters, and we're sharing playlists and music and defining those characters by the music in their lives, and yeah, really finding who these people were, and spending a lot of time together developing the relationships before shooting, and then had an amazing time. It was I think there were a little family that we had there. It's been heartbreaking. Yesterday was the premiere of the movie in Los Angeles, so it's been heartbreaking to kind of feel that the chapter is over.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely it's definitely a character film. Obviously, music is a very important part of it, but getting the characters right is probably the hardest, you know, connection to make, I would suppose, or the most necessary connection to make. But with regards to the music, uh, what was your greatest, I guess, success in wanting a song and actually getting it into the film?
I think first and foremost, it was Roxy Music and getting
Mm-hmm.
the involvement at the film. That was a big one. Nelly Furtado was another one, because both of the, Roxy and Nelly agreed to be in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
um, physically as opposed to just musically. Um, so those were two really special things that happened, big coups, I would say. And so, it started there, and then I think it was just creating a tapestry of songs that were helping tell the story and give the subtext of the movie lyrically. I worked with
Mm-hmm.
Mary Ramos, who's worked with Tarantino since the Kill Bill films as a music supervisor, and she's just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And DJ Harvey as well, and Ryan Lott, the composer, to really figure out what that soundscape was. So I was really lucky in being able to get a lot of the music that I wanted for the movie in order to help tell the story. So
Mm-hmm.
those two were some really big gets. And then, getting Lana Del Rey and Phoebe Bridgers was exciting as well. And I mean, there's so Jamie XX, and there's so much music that I love on the soundtrack. And it was really also about creating a soundtrack that could exist on vinyl in a tangible way, much like, the movie has as well. So
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, this is only your second feature film. The last one was a decade ago. How do you, how do you feel about waiting this long to get another film out? I mean, obviously you were trying to put other things together, and
yeah.
for whatever reason, they didn't happen. Well, it's got to be frustrating to take so long in between if your goal is to, direct what you write mostly.
Yeah, it is what it is, but I spent a lot of time writing for other people and
Mm-hmm.
directing commercials, and I like writing. I like the lifestyle of writing. Making a movie is um it's 2 years of your life, and it's all encompassing, and there's an intensity to it that really changes your life and lifestyle. Um, with writing, I can, take my computer anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I think it's this balance of, yes, there were two movies that I tried to make. There's one in 2016 that we couldn't get the financing for, and then one in
Mm-hmm.
2018 that um, I just don't think I was the right person for, which led me to this. So, you know, I, I'm, it was really exciting to get to make another movie, and we'll see how long it takes me to write the next one. But the majority of my career has been as a writer for other people, which I enjoy. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of the stuff, because your credits list only what was actually has been produced. So I'm guessing a lot of stuff you're doing is either say doctor work or things that are being worked on and are in whatever stage process they are with producers or production companies or studios. I would have to imagine, correct?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of doctor stuff that I've done, a lot of rewrites, and then there's a bunch of stuff. I think there's 4 movies moving into production this year. Um,
Isn't that weird how things go? It's
yeah,
like it's feast or famine.
yeah, yeah. But also, you never know. I mean, like things gear up and then they gear down. You just don't know what's going to happen. There's tons of movies that I've been a part of that seemed like they were going to go and they didn't, and other
Yeah,
stuff you didn't expect to and it did. So, you just never know how things play out. But I think that's the funny thing about this business is as you just described, it's like I can pay the rent, and there's just stuff that I've written that some people will never see or, that's
hmm,
still sitting in development or,
yeah.
whatever phase that it's been.
It-
But
yeah, yeah. There has to be some. I'm going to have to imagine there's a couple of things that you have to do. Number one, you have to prepare yourself for lean times because they may come.
mhm.
There's not a guarantee of work, but the other thing is the fact, as you mentioned, that you've written a great deal of things that maybe no one will ever see. And is there something about? Do you have to kind of let go of an ego with regards to stuff like that because it's out? Going in, it's completely out of your hands.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be too precious with it, but you're also, you're writing for other people, their producers and studios, and sometimes you write a script and everybody's excited about it, and things change. Like there are tons of amazing. There's so many great writers in this town, and there's tons of
Mhm.
amazing scripts out there that haven't been made.
Yeah,
And I think it's just really the luck of the draw. And there's so many components that go into getting a movie made.
yeah,
Script is maybe the starting point, but you're talking about the right actors, the financing, the studio schedules, who's available. Like you could have all these things aligned for you, and then the actor you're working with is busy for the next 2 years, or the director is busy or falls off to do something else, and so these
mhm.
things just kind of are at the mercy of, it's really sometimes a miracle when a movie
Yeah.
gets.
Yeah,
So
no, that's for sure. What? How did you feel about directing this as your second film? Meaning, what what were what were things you knew? Uh, bless you,
thank
doing this that you maybe weren't as aware of on the first go around.
you. I definitely had more resources on this movie.
Mhm.
That first movie we made for like 4.5, $5 million. And it was a 230-page script, and we shot in 40 days in New York. That was a bit of insanity to a degree, and um, great experience. I loved every second of it. But you know, this movie, I definitely had more resources, and definitely a bigger support system. Um, but lesser known actors, which was kind of this inverse uh,
Right.
that happened. But you know, I'm it's fun to work with young up and coming actors like these because they're first of all, I hit the jackpot because they're so talented and wonderful and just lovely human beings. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it's just having those resources that just makes you realize like how much easier things can be sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and people think sometimes that having somebody in a film makes things easier, and sometimes even with small films, having a big name sometimes doesn't necessarily even help. Or I'm not saying that's the case with your first film. I'm just saying, and there's no rhyme or reason sometimes with film
For sure.
uh, on how things will work based on how you decide to choose people to be involved in it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, what was I okay, so what was the most challenging thing that you had to deal with on this particular film?
We shot on location in Los Angeles, so I think we're at the mercy of the city.
Mhm.
I obviously wanted to make a love letter to Los Angeles, but when you're shooting in Echo Park, and there's like helicopters and
Hmm.
sirens and I mean, sometimes it's just like insane the amount of things that would go on and destroy sound and you just can't shoot. So
Yeah.
you're really at the mercy of the elements in the city,
Hmm.
this exercise in trying to control chaos. So that was a lot of it. I mean, it was a really kind of like charmed shoot. I mean, we had a
Hmm.
great crew, we had a great team, we had a great studio. So I think I felt really lucky on this one. I mean, there were some complex locations, where we had to get to the top of a building with an old elevator that was abandoned and, then walk up 2 flights of stairs with equipment, and, on a roof that we weren't, you had to be sure that it could hold a certain amount of weight. And, so
Right.
you're dealing with, you know, logistical things that were trickier. Um, but it's always just the stuff that you don't expect, like when you go in and do a location scout, you're obviously trying to listen, for sound purposes. And then, you get in on the day and then there's a restaurant that's like preparing food for the night and there's massive chopping noises and you got to go tell, you're trying to like tell them, can you please stop? And you're like,
Right.
you can tell a restaurant to like shut its business down, so it's yeah, it's just this exercise in dealing with the elements. So those were the things that kind of threw us for a loop where we weren't expecting them.
Gotcha. And this is your first film that you're, I mean, it's getting the film release, week long film release. It's going to a streamer, Hulu.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, obviously you are comfortable. I would imagine with your film being at least being able to be seen somewhere, but um, how do you feel about the sub? The idea that even though different films are can be successes at the box office, there's still limited room all of a sudden for things to get a full theatrical release.
Yeah. Look, I'm really happy that we got a theatrical release. I think when we were initially set up, we were designed to go straight to streaming. So like the fact that we got this theatrical release, I think is great because I think it's a movie that plays really well in a theater,
Mm-hmm.
and as someone who is a movie lover, like I love seeing movies in a theater with the right sound and like the you know, it's the best way possible. So
Yeah,
seeing it as you sound design it, seeing it as you visualized it. So obviously that is the best contact, but I also have no interest in telling people how to watch movies. Like it's their
yeah,
choice, like if you're 14 and you want to watch a movie on your phone, then that's your prerogative. Like
yeah.
if and I think a lot of people watch that I know, watch
Mm-hmm.
movies at home now.
Yeah.
I think I love to get to the theater as much as I can, but I can count on my hands how many times I've been in the movie theater this
Mm-hmm.
year. And I think when life gets busy or crazy, it's like, yeah, do I have a nice screen and do I have a nice sound? Sure. Is it a movie theater? No, but I think you do your best to watch stuff in the way that you can. So I'm obviously made it to sound as good as possible and to look as good as possible in
Mm-hmm.
the context of a movie theater. But if people want to watch it in HDR at home, then
Yeah,
that's a prerogative. So I don't think we should. It's not my job to tell you how or where or when to watch the movie. And
yeah,
the choices are there and you can make that choice. And I think that's what it should be.
yeah. I mean, as a quick example, I mean, I've seen, say, Pulp Fiction. I don't know how many times in my life, and I had avoided it for a number of years. And then one day I was, you know, went to bed early and thought I'll watch it on my phone. And oddly enough, it kind of made it almost new again because of the different perspective, I guess, because it was right in front of my face. I had earbuds in, blah
Yeah.
blah blah. So it can, I think a good film is a good film, and it holds up however you're watching it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I mean, because there are films that, both of us were never alive to see in the theater that we have to
No, I
see.
mean, I date myself, but like, I remember, you get to see a movie in the theater when it was had its theatrical release back in the day, but then you bought it on VHS.
Right,
And you kept that VHS and you watched it a million times on an NTSC screen, which is garbage compared
right,
to like,
right,
what you can watch today.
right.
But the majority of times that I've watched Goodfellas was on, a VHS or,
Yeah,
a DVD. And like, if you have the chance to have that theatrical experience with a big group of people, that's great. But a lot of the time you can also go to the cinema and the theaters are empty.
yeah,
And I think that's a great way to see it. But like, I think the ultimate experience is that big theatrical experience with a full theater. And then
yeah,
you can feel the energy of the audience and, like that's something special, but
yeah,
it's ephemeral. And, I think no one, the only thing we can do is as filmmakers is try and put stuff out that entices people to go to the movie theater. And then if it lives on in the streaming space, then that's, you know, as long as they're watching stuff and enjoying stuff and entertained and
yeah,
appreciating it. That the
yeah.
dialogue, you and I having this conversation is the point.
Mhm.
Like I think people talking about movies as cultural capital is the point. And that's always been the fun of movies. It's not just the watching of it. It's like the connection we get by talking about these movies and what they mean to us and the details in them. And that's where it gets fun and interesting.
Yeah,
So what a movie means to each of us is just a lot of, it's fun. That's
yeah,
cultural right
yeah. I
there.
mean, a prime example. I mean, I've seen the first two Godfather films in the theater, but I saw them nearly 30 years after I saw them on cassette,
Yeah.
in the 80s. So, or on cable or wherever I, happened to see them. And it's like, it doesn't mean make those films any less special because that's how I first experienced them, and
Yeah,
greatness will always cut through.
for sure. For sure. And when American Cinematheque, the Arrow shows Apocalypse Now or
Right.
Lawrence of Arabia or 2001, you get to see those movies on the big screen. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But again, the majority of the time, those things aren't running every day, so we're watching them at home.
Yeah. I've only got a couple more minutes, but I did want to ask you because of the fact that, we were talking about your listed credits, and there's one that, I have to imagine there's not much you can really say about it because you were just credited as a story on it, but you were involved with Black Widow, so you
Mhm.
worked with Marvel.
Mhm.
I'm just interested to see when and how they first approached you, and were you in that like program with a bunch of other writers where you're kind of like working on different things and seeing what developed?
No, I think at that point, Jack Schaefer had written a draft and they brought me in to do a rewrite. I got a call. I'd worked with Scarlett Johansson before on another script that's
Mhm.
that's getting made, hopefully later this year.
So you
And
had that experience with her.
yeah, we had that experience, and I think there was a certain level of trust that she had with me as a writer, and then she shared that script with Marvel and the director, and they brought me in, and we worked together to crack story,
Mm,
uh, and then had to figure out how to get a draft quickly because they needed to greenlight the movie because it was shooting in May, and this was like November, December, so.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I worked really hard with them. We had some, I was in a room with the, producers of the movie from Marvel, Kate, the director, Scarlett, and we, you know, then I went off and worked on a few drafts and finally got to a draft that got the movie greenlit, and then went to London and worked in pre-production a little bit on it, and did did that, but it was a incredibly collaborative experience, just like making anything else.
Yeah.
They're trying to make great entertaining movies for people, and the like and audiences around the world, and they've been very successful at it. And yeah, it was a great learning experience, and it was really, interesting to work at that magnitude for the first time in my career.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what I was curious about because when Black Widow sits there in like as a big bold outlier between the two films you've actually made yourself, in terms of style and uh budget. And so it's just I think it's fascinating. I love it that you're not, dismissive necessarily of something like Marvel, just because it's mostly entertainment based. It's
No,
not,
I love movies. The movies I grew up on are Return of the Jedi and like
yeah,
E.T. and Back to the Future, and like I love all movies. Like,
yeah.
if I'll happily watch a Tarkovsky movie. If I'll watch
You're
100.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
Love. It's a brilliant movie. Like, I'll happily watch like The Three Colors by Kozlowski. Those movies are so special to me. We can get into sort of film theory and talk about Powell and Pressburger or whatever you want. Like, but also like there's just movies aren't just one thing. Like, their
Right.
medium is so big.
Yeah,
And if you think about the history of cinema going back to before sound, after sound, and that in that period, like this was entertainment. This was like an experience for people like
right.
that they got to go have and got to escape their lives from and to. And you look at some of the great movies of all time. I mean, if you think about, you know, look at these movies from the like Indiana Jones, and I think Raiders of the Lost Ark was nominated for Best Picture.
Mhm.
Like it's that it does so much, that movie. It's both like
Yeah,
high quality entertainment and a great movie.
yeah,
And I think Close Encounters, like these movies were always able to do a lot. And yes, I think you think about amazing filmmakers like Jonathan Glazer, who Zone of Interest is a masterpiece, but it's a very different movie than a Marvel movie, but like they're all part of the same medium, and that's what's, I
yeah,
think, so exciting about it, is you can allow yourself to go on a ride, and you can also like look at a movie that is so incisive and like difficult in a
yeah,
weird,
yeah.
so I think that's that's what I love about it.
Yeah,
Movies.
I mean, and that's why things like when Scorsese or Coppola just specifically crap on superhero movies as a rule, it's like, oh, I'm like, you guys, your generation is also Spielberg and Lucas. I mean,
Yeah.
so who like was David Lean, forgive me if I don't know when David Lean actually passed, but if, say David Lean was alive in the '70s when Star Wars was the rage, like would it be fair for him to be dismissive of Star Wars? Like,
Yeah.
it's all cinema. It's not all great, and obviously we get down to the fact that you know opinion is all that is in the end. Greatness can be something that most people think is stupid, but you think is the best thing ever made.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's look, Scorsese
they've
and
they have the right to say
they
to their opinions. That's for sure.
yeah, they've made some of the greatest movies of all time, and they can
Yeah,
say whatever they want, and by like, good for them. Like, they're the gods of cinema.
yeah,
But I think, like, music is similar. You can love a
right,
cotton candy pop song, and you can love
right.
a weird deep cut from a B-side of, the Silver Apples. Like, it
Yeah,
just that's the fun of this.
yeah,
And I think, like, sometimes, the it's the variety, it's the I think just the diversity of movies that's so awesome and amazing, that
yeah,
I can get joy out of a popcorn movie, just like I can get joy out of a very difficult, incisive, movie made very specifically for a small niche group.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I had more time, we could probably sit there and talk about music forever, as I'm a fellow music nut, and that's one of the things I love about the film. But I did want to say thank you again for joining me today. It's been a real honor. I did have one last quick question. Is there any chance the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby will ever come out in the States in all three versions?
I think if you go on iTunes
Uh-huh.
and there's an iTunes extras if you purchase the film, and it has
Ah,
original version him and her in there.
okay, cool. Because
So
I've always wanted to see those, but they're it was very hard to get to see
yeah,
them.
no, and I think I was talking about doing something about it as well, doing a separate release of those two movies, either on a new edition or something like that. But right now, if you wanted to see both of them,
Okay,
it's in iTunes. If you buy the movie in the extras, it's
okay,
in.
all
That's
right,
not
cool.
forcing you to buy anything. I'm just
No,
saying
no,
that
no,
you
no. I
it's
completely get it, but
available.
my other options were like foreign country releases, and I'm not going to go buy a player on the off chance it
Yeah,
doesn't work. So,
yeah.
but greatest hits is by the time this is out, this interview is on Hulu. Check it out. Ned Benson, continued good luck, and hope everybody goes and checks this thing out.
Thanks so much, Brett. Awesome to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. You have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All
Thanks.
right, bye.
Bye.